Have you ever been in a debate where, despite all your arguments, you were left with a feeling of defeat? Have you ever felt as though every word that escaped your lips somehow distanced you from your inner strength? Perhaps you've encountered individuals who speak loudly, interrupt, mock, and dominate, masking arrogance with a facade of confidence. And perhaps, deep down, you believed that silence was a sign of weakness, an inability to defend yourself was surrender, and a lack of response meant losing. But what if all of this is merely a cunning illusion? What if true strength lies not in words, but in their absence? Friedrich Nietzsche, one of history's most controversial philosophers, recognized a truth few dare to admit. Those who speak too much reveal too much. Those who feel the constant need to convince others are already in a losing position. The world teaches us that we must fight for our ideas, explain them, and assert our correctness, as if every interaction is a battle for truth. But Nietzsche offers a different path, one more subtle, more disruptive, and incomparably wiser. He asserted that silence is not merely an absence of sound, but a powerful, overwhelming presence that can alter the course of any discussion. Prolonged silence can lead to deep confusion and even destabilization, compelling the interlocutor to involuntarily look inward. This text is for those who regularly feel ignored, as if relegated to the shadows, whose words and feelings are devalued. It's for those who, at the end of a conversation, feel annoyance realizing their true intentions and thoughts were never truly heard. It's intended for those tired of being an easy target, the ever-agreeable, nice guy striving for harmony, while others shamelessly exploit their peaceful nature. Perhaps such silence is mistakenly perceived as a sign of submission. However, today the true power of silence will be revealed, capable of becoming the most potent weapon in one's personal arsenal. Genuine victory lies not in triumphing in a verbal battle, but in the ability to avoid the very need to engage in one. We will explore silence from a new perspective, not as an absence of response, but as its highest form. By delving into Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophical reflections, one can master the art of controlling any situation without uttering a single word. Why is there such a strong urge for an immediate answer, refutation, correction, and proof of one's own correctness? The reason lies in a deeply ingrained belief in the necessity of defending the truth at all costs, in the fear that silence will be perceived as an admission of defeat. However, according to Nietzsche, this is precisely where a profound weakness manifests, the fear of appearing vulnerable. Behind this fear lurks an inflated ego, reacting painfully to any doubt, perceiving disagreement as a personal attack, and transforming a regular conversation into a battlefield. Friedrich Nietzsche, the insightful philosopher, asserted that in the heat of an argument, most people are driven not by a pursuit of truth, but by a thirst for power. They desperately try to defend their beliefs, not because they are certain of their unshakability, but out of fear that the slightest doubt might shatter their entire value system. In this context, argumentation ceases to be a tool for seeking wisdom, transforming instead into protective armor, a desperate cry of the ego striving to maintain control over the situation. What does this mean in practice? When a person feels an irresistible urge to justify themselves and prove their correctness, they inadvertently enter someone else's game and suffer defeat. The very need to defend one's position indicates that they are still captive to the desire to be accepted, acknowledged, and understood by others. Nietzsche aptly termed this phenomenon herd morality, behavior characteristic of those who live under the burden of others' expectations, who yearn to be perceived as good, right, and just in the eyes of others. However, it is precisely this insatiable craving for approval that makes a person vulnerable. True strength, according to Nietzsche, lies not in the ability to convince others of one's correctness, but in the complete absence of the need to do so. It manifests in the ability to firmly adhere to one's vision, even when faced with ridicule, criticism, and rejection. It means remaining misunderstood yet maintaining unwavering conviction in one's own truth. The author introduces a concept of strength defined not by triumphs in verbal battles, but by the development of inner potential. It is a strength born from the ability to remain unperturbed in situations of widespread panic. It grows stronger when one stops automatically reacting to external stimuli. To achieve true victory, one must realize that verbal battles are merely theatrical performances, and the one who first steps onto the stage to perform their role is already defeated. Friedrich Nietzsche asserted that a mind susceptible to reactions is a mind devoid of freedom. The true danger comes from an observant mind that needs no proof of its correctness. But the question arises, how does one exert influence while avoiding reactions? How does one convey strength without resorting to words, if words often fail? Nietzsche saw the answer in the concept of the Übermensch, an individual who transcends conventional morality and governs the world through absolute self-control. This figure will be explored in detail later, along with how it embodies the strategic application of silence as a tool for dominance. Is the reader ready for this level of understanding? Because it is from this moment that silence begins to speak. Friedrich Nietzsche crafted his works not for those who seek solace in weakness, but for the select few with the courage to gaze into the abyss of their own soul, to confront personal suffering, and to transform it into an inexhaustible source of strength. In his view, the common person drags out an existence bound by chains of conventions, moral dogmas, and an insatiable craving for external recognition. Alongside this, however, exists another type of individual, unique, potentially dangerous, and absolutely free in their expressions. The Übermensch does not merely passively react to external circumstances, they actively transform the world, shaping it according to their own vision. And what is particularly striking is that this process often unfolds in an atmosphere of complete silence. The Übermensch has no need to win verbal battles or engage in cheap, emotion-based manipulative games. They prefer to observe, analyze, and comprehend the essence of what is happening. They carefully weigh each word, choosing moments when to speak, and, even more importantly, when to remain silent, having grasped a truth many overlook. Silence is a unique form of communication. It is a language that does not seek to persuade or dissuade, but rather imposes its presence, exerting a powerful influence on those around them. The Übermensch's silence is not a sign of emptiness or ignorance. On the contrary, it represents a hidden threat, a symbol of unquestionable authority, the sound of absolute self-mastery. While others raise their voices in futile arguments, they command respect with a mere piercing gaze. While others expend energy on justifications and explanations, they maintain composure, observing and identifying others' vulnerabilities, using their tranquility as a potent weapon. This person's silence is like an impregnable wall, rising between them and the rest of the world. Those outside this fortress experience agonizing despair, trying to penetrate the secrets hidden behind its walls. In this state of confusion and uncertainty, they make ill-considered moves, revealing too much information and losing their inner balance. However, this silence is not a display of passivity or inaction, but rather a symbol of absolute control over one's own energy and strategic resource conservation. The Übermensch, as Nietzsche envisioned them, understands that every spoken word can be perceived as an exposed move in a complex game, and any emotional reaction as the bearing of a vulnerable spot. This is why they maintain composure and calmness, not because they have nothing to say, but because they feel no need to prove anything to others. Their very presence speaks louder than any words, causing anxiety and unease in those who encounter their silence. For it forces others to look within themselves, to confront their own internal noise and chaos. In modern society, overflowing with informational noise and bustle, those who have mastered the art of silence attain true greatness and power. Nietzsche saw the Übermensch as a creator of their own values, rules, and moral principles, independent of others' approval or condemnation. It is this independence and self-sufficiency that evokes fear and animosity, as there is nothing more destabilizing than an individual who cannot be manipulated by guilt, fear, or the desire for recognition. The Übermensch's silence serves as a reliable shield, protecting them from all these manipulative mechanisms. And when they do choose to speak, their words possess the power to overthrow entire empires and alter the course of history. However, this raises a crucial question. Why does silence cause such profound unease in others? What makes many feel threatened when someone chooses to refrain from responding? What processes occur in the human mind when an expected verbal exchange gives way to oppressive silence? The key lies in the depths of psychology. This is the area we intend to explore next. For to grasp the true power of silence, one must first understand the chaos it can sow in the minds of others. And believe me, this phenomenon is far more complex than it appears at first glance. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is a peculiar mirror, and the reflection it presents to many proves unbearable. When a person chooses not to respond, they not only deprive themselves of a voice, they force the other person to hear the echo of their own voice, to confront their arguments devoid of the usual support of external resistance. This throws them off balance, as most people speak not to express their thoughts and feelings. They speak to defend themselves, to convince themselves, to hide the void that gapes between their words and their true self. And when silence falls, the mask drops. In the realm of human interaction, social psychology has long observed that in tense situations, silence becomes a powerful tool, perceived as a hidden judgment. It doesn't matter if the person is merely a passive listener. The speaker involuntarily feels vulnerable and self-doubting. Why does this happen? Without a response or any reaction, they lose control over the conversation's flow and narrative direction. The human mind enters a state of heightened alert. The amygdala, the brain region responsible for fear and anxiety, activates, causing the person to experience unease. The interlocutor begins to project their own fears onto the silent counterpart. Are they judging me? Did they notice my insecurity? Do they realize I'm exaggerating? On this psychological battlefield, silence becomes an invisible weapon, delivering subtle blows that are, nevertheless, felt by all participants. Friedrich Nietzsche anticipated this phenomenon long before modern psychological research confirmed it. In his view, the common person exists in a state of slavish dependence on their reactions. They act impulsively, are guided by vanity, and speak out of fear of being forgotten. The higher spirit, conversely, possesses self-control and prefers silence, realizing that every uttered word is a concession to an opponent. Any emotional reaction is an involuntary cry, pointing to vulnerable spots where a blow should be directed. Moreover, the phenomenon of silence has a truly devastating impact on those skilled in manipulating others. These individuals, whose well-being depends on their ability to control the emotions of others, desperately need a reaction to maintain their power and influence. When a person refuses to react, they effectively break a vicious cycle, plunging the manipulator into a state akin to panic. They desperately need a reaction to confirm their significance and control. Deprived of this fuel, they lose their footing, revealing to others the weakness they so carefully tried to hide behind a mask of confidence. But the effect of silence extends much deeper. It can awaken unresolved emotional wounds, activating traumas associated with rejection, abandonment, and humiliation. A person suddenly realizes they are no longer the center of attention, that their words lose their power, and their presence becomes insignificant. For a narcissistic ego, this proves an unbearable blow. This is precisely why, by choosing silence, one not only defends themselves but strikes at the most vulnerable point, the core of the manipulator's illusory world. Silence demands considerable inner strength. It can cause discomfort not only for others but also for the individual themselves, as it contradicts established stereotypes and the instinctive desire to react, justify, and explain one's actions. However, this is precisely where its power lies. It requires self-mastery, and mastery, as is known, is a true manifestation of strength. Having understood the influence silence has on a person's inner world, how it provokes doubt, breaks down barriers, and tears away facades, it's necessary to move forward. It's crucial to transition from passive observation to the active and conscious use of this potent force. Moving forward, we will discuss how to transform silence into an effective weapon, allowing one to prevail in arguments without resorting to words. By mastering this art, one will gain independence from others' manipulations. The time has come not just to recognize the power of silence, but to learn to apply it in practice, for theory without application is dead. From now on, the reader will learn to transform their silence into a tool possessing surgical precision. This is not about defensive tactics, but about a sharp blade capable of piercing others' masks at the most unexpected moment. The first step on this path is simple, yet requires considerable willpower: to remain silent when your inner voice demands a reaction. This is a test, for everything within you will strive to respond, to justify, to prove your correctness. However, this urge is destructive. By succumbing to it, one demonstrates that they are still under others' control, that others' opinions still matter, and that they continue to play by their rules. True silence is born only when this need is suppressed, when the realization dawns that you owe nothing to anyone, that truth does not need to be proclaimed to exist. In the arsenal of silence, observation holds a special place. While other participants in the conversation are engrossed in verbal acrobatics, striving to fill emerging pauses, you immerse yourself in attentive listening. However, this is not merely waiting for your turn to speak, but rather akin to an experienced tracker, keenly listening for the slightest rustles in the forest. Your goal is to detect those subtle fears hidden between the lines, to uncover the finest contradictions, to recognize insecurity skillfully disguised beneath a mask of arrogance. And all these details are meticulously recorded in your memory, for when it is your turn to speak, if you deem it necessary at all, your statement will possess surgical precision. It will be a precisely aimed strike from a master, flawlessly commanding the emotional territory of their interlocutor. Another powerful tool is time. One must learn to control the duration of silence, for a pause is not just a break in conversation, but a powerful element of tension, and tension, in turn, is a source of strength. While your opponent, having expressed their thought, eagerly awaits your reaction, its absence generates inner discomfort within them. The inevitably rising tension compels the mind to fill the resulting void with all sorts of conjectures, fears, and even paranoid thoughts. At times, a mere glance accompanied by meaningful silence can make a far deeper impression than a dozen impeccably formulated sentences. And finally, the fourth weapon is unpredictability. By mastering the art of silence, you become a figure whose actions are difficult to anticipate, and everything unpredictable, as is known, instills fear, as those around you lose understanding of what to expect from you. In such a situation, people lose their advantage and begin to exercise caution, carefully weighing every word spoken. Thus, a fundamental shift in the logic of interaction occurs. From a reactive figure, you transform into the conversational gravitational center. And at this very moment, silence ceases to be merely the absence of sound. It becomes a pure form of dominance. However, one must exercise caution so as not to confuse silence with inaction. Friedrich Nietzsche, as is known, was never an advocate of weakness. The silence in question is active, intense, and filled with resolve. One does not hide in the shadows, but prepares, carefully chooses the moment, and takes a stance, possessing an inner strength that needs no demonstration to be felt by others. And when the opportune moment arrives, when silence has already conveyed all that is needed, they can utter a single phrase, a precise comment, something that will conclude the discussion not through volume, but by virtue of its truth, depth, and irrefutability. This, however, leads to an even more subtle question. Up to this point, we have discussed how to use silence to achieve triumph. But there are situations where the goal is not merely victory, but emotional survival. There are times when people don't just argue, but use, manipulate, and exhaust, and a person, without realizing it, daily gives away a part of their strength. They're dominated without a single word being spoken. And here we reach the darkest point of this journey, when silence ceases to be a strategy and transforms into the silent scream of someone who has lost control over their own life. The following narrative will reveal the bitter truth about how individuals can become puppets without even realizing it. While a person believes they are avoiding sharp edges, someone else might be building their empire by exploiting their silence. Friedrich Nietzsche, the insightful philosopher, long ago foresaw such a turn of events. What could be more repulsive than being stripped of one's voice? It's when a person is trained to believe that silence is their only path to salvation. When swallowing insults, conceding in arguments, and avoiding confrontation at all costs are presented as signs of maturity and maintaining silence as a symbol of composure. But what if all of this is a meticulously set trap? In many situations, such silence is not a display of wisdom, but a veiled form of submission. Nietzsche pointed out with ruthless clarity that the peace, so often spoken of, is nothing more than a domesticated capitulation. Have you noticed how certain individuals exploit others' calmness, their ability to listen, overlook flaws, and avoid confrontation? They impose their beliefs, dictate their will, occupy others' positions, and those, in turn, allow them to do so. A person convinces themselves that it's not worth fighting, that preserving harmony is more important, that nothing is truly significant. However, the truth is that this illusory peace comes at an exorbitantly high price. And the saddest part is that one is manipulated by those who perfectly understand that they will never fight back. Friedrich Nietzsche, an eminent thinker, addressed the concept of slave morality in his works. He defined it as a system of values cultivated by the weak in spirit, a means of adaptation and survival in a society dominated by strong individuals. This morality preaches humility, guilt, and the pursuit of universal approval. In essence, it is a hidden mechanism that pushes individuals towards self-abasement, rejection of their own individuality, and blind obedience, all while creating an illusion of virtue. However, Nietzsche's words were not addressed to those who meekly accept their fate. His words were for those with the courage to break the chains of imposed beliefs, who recognize manipulation and are ready to end their own oppression. When an individual chooses the path of silent acquiescence, allowing it to corrode them from within, they unconsciously forfeit their strength. External expectations begin to shape their personality, erasing their uniqueness and transforming them into a reflection of others' desires. This is directly opposite to what Nietzsche called the will to power. True will to power is not about aggression or dominance over others. It implies self-control, the ability to manage one's own life, and to independently determine one's path. It is the ability to remain silent not out of fear, but from the realization that you owe nothing to anyone. The era of submissive silence must pass, giving way to silence filled with genuine presence. This is not the silence that bows in submission, does not demean dignity, and does not beg for the right to exist. It is a silence that, like a lighthouse, rises amidst raging chaos and, without uttering a single word, can alter the course of events. Such silence would earn Friedrich Nietzsche's respect, the silence of a person who has achieved complete self-mastery. But how does one reach this pinnacle of self-mastery? How does one transform from a puppet, pulled by the strings of another's will, into the master of their own destiny? How does one eradicate herd morality within oneself and be reborn as someone whose silent presence alone commands unquestionable authority? The answer lies in the most magnificent and inspiring concept of Nietzsche's philosophy, the idea of the Übermensch. This figure has been discussed before, and now it's time to understand how to embody it. The concluding chapter will reveal what is necessary to become this new type of human being. The world no longer needs empty talkers. It craves those who master the art of silence and, through it, assert their will. The path has led to its final point, and now it is necessary to grasp one crucial truth. Silence is not an absence, not an emptiness, and not merely a pause between words. True silence is the quintessence of presence, a mastery, a sign that a person no longer reacts to the world but shapes it by the very fact of their existence. Friedrich Nietzsche did not create his works for those content with mere survival. His pen was directed toward those who strive for self-overcoming, toward those willing to shed the hypocritical masks imposed by society, even if it causes pain. The Übermensch's silence is not a sign of suppression or cowardice. It is the composure of a warrior who has triumphed even before the battle began. It is the imperturbability of one who needs no proof, for they understand their essence and know their worth. Take a careful look at your life. How many times have you had to remain silent out of fear, guilt, or a desire to avoid discomfort? How many times have you allowed others to make decisions, speak their minds, and trample upon your personal convictions? According to Nietzsche, such an existence is an insult. Accepting such silence is tantamount to betraying oneself. From now on, silence must change its nature. It must cease to be an escape and transform into an invisible cry of confidence, a boundary asserting one's essence, even if it remains misunderstood by others. For who you are does not need understanding, but demands to be brought into existence, which, in turn, requires courage. Do you have the courage? Do not forget that those weak in spirit are prone to noisy protests, while those possessing true strength prefer to remain silent. And only the wise know when the opportune moment arrives to voice their position or make a decision.